Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, more than 200 people were killed Sunday in a suicide bombing in the central Baghdad, just days after an attack in Dakha left at least 20 dead, and bombings in Istanbul killed 45. At least 2 of the attacks have been claimed by ISIL. Can the violence be contained? And as traditional media races to compete against digital and mobile, will a new model of media convergence finally find its footing? Take a look at the top story today. Last week saw multiple tragedies at the hands of extremist terrorists. On Tuesday, 35 people died in explosions at the Istanbul airport, and 20 hostages were killed on Friday night when Islamist militants stormed a cafe in the Bangladeshi capital, Dakha. Then, just 2 days later, 2 powerful blasts hit the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, which killed at least 213 people. ISIL has claimed the responsibility for at least 2 of these attacks, and the third is also assumed to have been their work. We will return to our panel, but first, let's take a look at this.
In just a few short moments, many families were torn apart. 2 separate bombings hit Baghdad over the weekend, leaving at least 200 dead. The bodies are still being carried from the ruins. Many are children. The grief and anger are palpable as the search continues for the dead and anyone who might still be trapped alive.
Most of the people in the building were in their 20s, and now hundreds of people have been hurt here. The government sits in a chair doing nothing when it comes to security.
The bombing was the 3rd major attack over the past week. First, a triple suicide bombing killed 45 at Istanbul's airport. Then on Friday night, gunmen stormed an upmarket restaurant in Bangladesh's diplomatic zone, killing mostly non-Muslim hostages, including 9 Italians, 7 Japanese, and a citizen each from the United States and India.
We don't want this. Please stop this. Stop this. Stop this from our society, from our country. I want to live in peace.
ISIL has claimed responsibility for the attack in Bangladesh. But Bangladeshi officials said the 7 militants who carried out the attack were homegrown.
Those who died in the commando operation, they were all Bangladeshis. They were not foreigners, and I don't believe they have any link with any foreign countries. They were homegrown and they took their directions from the local groups.
1 week, 3 attacks, more than 250 people dead. The whole world has expressed condemnation of the attacks and condolences for the victims. But terrorist attacks seem to be on the rise. For the families of the victims, life will never go back to normal.
And for more on all of this series of terrorist attacks, we are joined here in the Beijing studio, Yang Xiyu, who is a senior fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir. Also joining us in New Delhi, in India, we are having Mr. Manoj Joshi, who is a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Meanwhile, joining us from Islamabad, we are having Zahid Hussain, an award-winning journalist and writer from the Wilson Center. Gentlemen, welcome to the 3 of you. Of course, one tragedy after another. The death toll keep on rising, really raise a series of very serious questions. First of all, may I have your opinion, Mr. Hussain, about the nature of these attacks? Earlier, we have already heard from the backgrounder, there were different opinions as to whether these were done by ISIL or ISIL followers, at least the case of Bangladesh.
Well, actually, these attacks, most gruesome of them have been certainly had the ISI imprint on them. Some of them have been claimed by ISIS, and others actually we have clear linkages with that. I think the most gruesome was what happened in Dhaka. And the people, the young gunmen, young boys actually from the elitist school were involved into that. That is quite alarming because they are the people who are from the privileged background, and they had actually no as such actually madrasa or seminary education. So that has caused a serious concern, because this is not the first time that we are seeing that more educated people are being influenced by organization like Daesh.
I see.
We have seen it in Pakistan. We have not now seeing it in Bangladesh. We have seen it actually a few months ago. There was a massacre of a non-Muslim community, and the person involved had also come from a very elite business school. So that shows actually that radicalization is taking place through this website, through other means.
I see. But the question is not necessarily whether one is educated or not, whether one comes from wealthy families or not, but more importantly, whether they are centrally planned by ISIL or they are the so-called local options. And what logic were they operating under? In that regard, let me go to you, Mr. Joshi, for your analysis.
Well, I don't think these were centrally planned by ISIL. What has happened is that across the world, the Islamic world is in a sort of a ferment. There have been multiple radical groups. Many of the radical groups are under pressure, like the Al-Qaeda, or things are happening in Afghanistan. In Bangladesh, there have been Islamist groups in the past. Now we find that the ideology of ISIL is attracting them. And so whether, I do not think these are centralized operations, these are decentralized operations who owe allegiance to ISIL. In this case, of course, the very fact that an ISIL related website broadcast their pictures indicated that there was some amount of coordination on the part of the two. Because I don't think that sitting in Raqqa, the ISIL leadership can manage multiple operations around the world in this fashion. I think the decentralization principle is the one that is operating here, just as it is operating for the Al-Qaeda now.
Right. Mr. Yang, from your perspective, the ideology both gentlemen have mentioned have been very strong to those young men and women who committed themselves to ISIL. But there is also a very important factor here. As some of those Bangladeshi officials investigating into this terrorist case was talking about, that these young people are not necessarily just subscribed to the ideology to kill people, but also to let it kill themselves. And therefore, many are wondering what is about ISIL that would attract so many young people. As the other gentleman mentioned, even coming from very well-off families, certainly they don't have a social divide to worry about. They also don't have their own future to worry about.
Well, it's a very key question to the international community. The varied, diversified attackers and attacks incidents indicate at least the spread of the extremist attacks all over the world, regardless region, regardless religious, regardless ideology. So fundamentally, the spreading of such extremist ideology is really a serious challenge approaching to all of us. So that is the fundamental question. So I think the recent serious attacks reflect different characteristics, but in nature, the extremist ideology is the common root. But we need to consider or think why such an extremist ideology spread throughout vast regions among different groups of peoples.
And your answer is?
Well, diversified reasons. So on one hand, we broke the bottom line of the order. Many people have been talking about a lot world order, but we, to some degree, we ignore the state order. So it seemed to me, so for some of powers in the world, they only allow or accept a single type of regime, and then they want to remove all the different other regimes they hate or dislike. So when we broke this bottom line, then the individual state will fall in instability or even in all disorder. So that is the one of the roots. The other roots is the gap between the rich and the poor, and injustice. That's not necessarily say rich people will satisfy, because of the fast-growing gap that also trigger different people to think this issue in different ways.
I see. But the other important issue is that what about the counterattacks that has been conducted by the international community? For example, illustrated by the airstrikes against ISIL. We've seen that in Syria. We've also seen that in Iraq. Mr. Joshi, what do you make of it at this moment? The function of it and the consequences of it. Useful or not?
Well, I think that air attacks is a bad idea anywhere. We have seen in the case of Pakistan and the frontier region of Pakistan and in Afghanistan, because air attacks are not very accurate. And often what happens is they kill a lot of innocent people as well. So I think that the only way to deal with it is through ground operations. And I think the world community has to realize that if it is serious about what is happening in that area, in the ISIL-held areas, then there must be a united effort by the world community to mount a ground-based operation. It need not require forces from other countries, but to facilitate the local forces, maybe the Iraqis, maybe the Syrians, maybe the Kurds. But the fact of the matter is that aerial intervention by itself is not a particularly good idea. It has only limited value.
What do you think, Mr. Hussein, about this? Airstrikes vis-a-vis ground forces, ground operations by the locals, which is likely to be more efficient? Why?
Well, I agree that air operation does not actually produce the same kind of results. There's always a danger of collateral damage. But basically what is happening at the point, yes, actually the military operation in Iraq and other places, they have managed to contain the advance of the ISIS. In fact, actually they have been actually pulled out from several places. Fallujah is one of the examples. But the problem is that when we are talking about fighting ISIS, we are just focusing on military aspect of it. We are not actually thinking in terms of ideology, which is much more dangerous, because what we are seeing actually as the ISIS has been stopped, or basically most of the territory under its control has been actually taken back. But the ideology has spread. Over the last few months, we have seen that ISIS has stepped up or escalated terrorist attacks all over the world. It's not just in Middle East,
right.
But what we have seen.
But Mr. Hussein, we all understand that there is a spread of the ideology. We said that from the very beginning. So, is there any other means that you come up with that is likely to deal with this ideology issue and prevent it from spreading immediately? And in that regard, what would be the relations between airstrikes and the stop of the ideology, or at least the efforts to stop the ideology?
Well, actually, I think ideology means some of those radical thinking, those organizations which are basically espousing that ideology, or even actually the websites or the internet, which basically are propagating ISIS ideology, should be checked. Then also, actually, I would say that some of those issues should also be addressed, which allows actually and which help or encourage this kind of radicalization. In various countries, it depends on the country to country. The sources of radicalization in one country may be different from the other country.
Right.
But what is happening is that ISIS provides them some kind of forum to actually to express their anger and whatever actually. So what I'm saying actually, when I'm talking about ideology, is also we should examine the political and ideological causes of radicalization.
Right. Well, we all
countries.
understand this from the very first moment ISIL make their mark when it comes to terrorist attacks. But the question is, in the short term, how can we contain this? Is it airstrike, or shall we just sit still until they go on with further strikes? What is the root cause? There are different opinions about that. And then what are the ways to deal with these root causes? If we are really dealing with these root causes beautifully, we're all going to have a very equalized world, but that is not a reality, as we all know. So how can we in the short term be able to stop ISIL, at least to stop the spread of ISIL?
Well, first of all, a proper airstrike. I cannot imagine stop all airstrikes that will trigger another round of troubles, another kind of troubles. But the proper strike is a must. The so-called proper means only when you have a full confidence to do a right thing, then you can do.
But
you
then,
cannot rely on
Mr. Yang, may I just help you to understand this a little bit more, and our audience as well? We have loopholes in the intelligence services.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody recognizes that. Yeah. It's very true, intelligence community themselves as well. And also, many of those targets that has been identified by the airstrikes were not necessarily the target of ISIL, but eventually it turned out to be the case, yet nobody knew from the very beginning. So we've seen a lot of loopholes. That is the reality. What about under this reality, what can be done?
That means the airstrikes will be very, very limited. Only when you have a full evidence or full confidence, then you can do. That will be. That's
so you're talking about ground forces? Is that what you're saying?
Then we have to rely on the ground forces. That's one front. The other front is facing the fast spreading of the ideology, extremist ideology. We need to take actions on website. We cannot allow the so-called freedom of speech regarding to the extremist ideology spread through our website. So I can imagine without the existing technology, I don't think such ISIL ideology can spread so fast and so wide.
There has been a number of terrorist attacks over the past few years, and those terrorist attacks certainly have caused a lot of casualties. A record of major attacks carried out by the terrorist organization since September 2014 by the New York Times, we're going to see, is a sobering reminder that terrorism is a global problem. Take a look at this. In total, more than 1,200 people outside of Iraq and Syria have been killed already in attacks inspired or coordinated by the Islamic State. Nearly half of the victims were killed in attacks that targeted Westerners. The others have also been civilians in Arab and other non-Western countries killed in mosques, government offices, and also other targets. It seems that the killing is indiscriminate, and also Westerners and non-Westerners, Christians, Muslims, all kinds of religious people alike. We see these kind of patterns over the past few years. The question now is, what can the international community do at this moment, Mr. Yang? We heard from John O'Brien, who is the director of Central Intelligence Agency from the United States. He was talking about as the airstrikes and the counter battles against ISIL continue and intensify, it's very likely that ISIL push back even further with these kind of terrorist attacks around the world. Some is centrally planned, some are more local options. What can we do at this moment with this possibility? Briefly from you.
I think when we continue our efforts in the battlefield against ISIL state, all the country governments should strengthen their own homeland security. That's the reality that we cannot expect where and how the spreading extremist activities goes. But the strengthening cooperation, the international, and strengthen their domestic security measures. That is the must.
Mr. Joshi, what do you make of it? Is there going to be closer coordination among countries fighting against the terrorism? We've seen calls about that, but not necessarily realization of that over the past few years.
I think there will be closer coordination and cooperation because if you look at the ISIL ideology, it's a global ideology. They want a global caliphate. They are trying to, through their attacks, They are trying to separate the Muslim community from the rest of the world. They are trying to radicalize the Muslim community and tell them that the only option for Muslims is endless war and to convert the entire world to Islam, meaning that is their ISIL point of view. So if the world is confronting an organization which is promising global jihad, I think the rest of the world needs to coordinate their activities to try and neutralize this threat. And I think cooperation is very important, because in this era when we travel all across the place,
right,
and this kind of ideology spreads through the internet, a lot of self-radicalization is happening. I think much closer cooperation between the various countries is needed.
But Mr. Joshi, what is preventing us from coordinating with one another?
Well, the problem is politics. You know, India has been trying to persuade the world to come up with an international convention, or United Nations convention on terrorism. The United Nations itself has been trying for the last, I think, 15-20 years to have a convention, but somehow or the other, the countries of the world are not even united in deciding what is terrorism. They are finding it a problem to define terrorism, and so we do not have an international convention. And that really is the problem, because if we cannot define the problem, how do we resolve it? How do we solve it?
All right, lack of international convention. Mr. Hussein, what do you think? Very briefly from you before we wrap up.
Well, actually, I think probably it's very important to defeat ISIS militarily and to push them out of those territories, because that has given them such a clout and such kind of influence. Yes, I agree with that, that there has to be a kind of international cooperation to fight terrorism, which is basically threatening the security of every country. But I think probably what is most important is that Muslim countries should realize much more, because it is that Middle Eastern countries and other Muslim countries have suffered much more because of this Islamic terrorism, and I think probably that is very important. But unfortunately, what is hindering the cooperation is the civil war within Middle East. That is the biggest actually problem in tackling the threat from ISIS.
Zahid Hussein,
yes,
and also Yang Xiyu. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Our time is running up. I'm sure there will be other debates about this. This is obviously important topic, and yet never have the sufficient answers. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Appreciate it. Stay with us here on World Insight. We've got our final segment coming right up. As traditional media works to find its place in an ever-diversifying media landscape, how will we receive our news in the future? Welcome back. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. A recent report says social media has overtaken television and other media organizations as young people's main source of news. Some say this trend and the rising use of smartphones to access news are undermining so-called traditional business models. Earlier in February, President Xi Jinping also stressed the importance of media convergence between the so-called old and so-called new media. However, the government has also recently banned the news media from gathering unconfirmed information from social media source alone. So what will media look like in the future? We're going to have a discussion about this, but first, take a look at this report.
The future of news production. Social media has overtaken television for the first time as young people's main source of news, according to a new study. Figures released by the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism show that half of all online users surveyed said they use social media as a news source, with 1 in 10 saying it is their main method. The number of young people aged between 18 and 24 who said they use social media as their main news source had surpassed those who watch news on television, at 28% compared with 24%. Many say this trend and the rising use of mobile phones to access news are undermining traditional business models. Online media platforms have also been growing quickly in China. And social media and mobile devices have changed people's reading habits.
I can read on the mobile device whenever I'm free. Reading is becoming more fragmented in the digital age.
Earlier in February, President Xi stressed the need for media convergence between old and new media. In China, many traditional media organizations have expanded their business to the internet, creating apps and using Weibo and WeChat platforms.
The
internet can be very personalized. It offers many choices. That's why it gains more viewers. Besides, traditional TV programs are normally used for live broadcasting and rebroadcasts, so they don't offer ways to interact with viewers. However, we are looking forward to cooperation with traditional TV broadcasters because they have very strong production abilities. But they need to use different ways to produce for online videos during the cooperation.
As old media adapts, it has experimented with gathering information from social media. But recently, the Chinese government banned news media from reporting unverified information shared on social media. As the media landscape evolves, we can expect further cooperation between online media and traditional TV.
And for more on the so-called coexistence of the so-called old and the new media, we are joined here in the Beijing studio, Professor Teng Jimeng from the American Studies Center at Beijing Foreign Studies University, and also joining us from Washington, D.C., we're having Ms. Imani Cheers, who is Assistant Professor of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. Welcome to both of you. First of all, which is likely to decide the future of media? Is it the content, or is it the means with which to carry the content? Let's go to Ms. Cheers.
Good evening. Yeah, I think actually we're going to see that it's a combination of both. So if content is good, you're going to see it anywhere. But the way in which you consume that content is ever evolving and changing. So whereas before we might have to wait obviously for a news report in the evening or in the morning news or even a newspaper, now we're able to get content really, really quickly and accurately, I might add, using social media platforms.
Will we, be able to have both accurate and very speedy information? Will we have sometimes to sacrifice one in order to get the other? What are some of the latest observations? Professor Cheers.
I think it's really important when you have something like breaking news, such as your previous segment that looked at the attack in Bangladesh and an attack in Baghdad over the weekend. I think when you have sort of that immediate breaking news, you are going to have some variances in accuracy, and that's the case whether it be on social media or even if we went back before social media. You still had to make sure reporters and news gatherers that you were able to verify your sources. I think now we have the opportunity of what I like to call citizen journalism. So it's not just about do you as a network or an agency have someone on the ground in said area, but then you're able to really utilize things like Twitter and even Facebook, everything from people checking in, letting you know that they're safe, or even oftentimes offering real live immediate images, voices, sounds of said event that just occurred.
Professor Teng, what do you make of it? Content vis-a-vis the means to consume the content, which is likely to drive us in the future?
Well, once again, I think that the content is important. Content, to me, is always king. But then with the new devices, with the new social media and other new medias, I think it really gives what we call a new assistant, a new arm in helping the old traditional media in professing, in communicating the content. But then content needs to be constantly, in a sense, reinvented, innovated, and updated so that they can meet the demands of the new consumers, because we are living in a new consumer society, and especially young consumers.
We are having much more diversified assortment for different kinds of news, comments as well. But at the same time, we are having an explosion of information and opinions. And therefore, people are asking the question, do we really need to have all of these? Of course, it's a reality. We have to face this reality. But the question is, do we need to have all of this? Do we need to read all of this? Do we as individuals, when we consume the content, have to identify the so-called false from the reality, the wrong from the correct? Will individual citizens have this capability? At this moment, it seems that citizens have to armor themselves with all of these capabilities in order to be a responsible consumer of news. Professor Cheers.
I think it's really important. Obviously, sources and credibility are also paramount. So you want to make sure that if you are reposting, reading, retweeting, or even just consuming, of course, for your own personal knowledge, that things are coming from a reliable, credible source. And that's with everything, whether it be commentary. Anyone, of course, we know can put up a blog and put information out, whether it be false or true. So I think it's really important that you have to make sure that in terms of news and facts and what you're finding out, whether it be, you know, the number of casualties in a terrorist bombing or even your, you know, your local weather report, you want to make sure that it's coming from a credible place.
Yeah, that is the accuracy of it. But what about the enormous amount of information, whether you need it or not, and the distractions, quote unquote, that sometimes you have to have when you are using certain means of consuming the information. Do we have solutions about this at this moment?
Wow, that's a difficult question.
It is a difficult question.
Time where we do have a lot of information in front of us, and how you sift through that. I like to do with my students here at George Washington University in DC. I'm really big on media literacy. So yes, you're being bombarded with images, with sounds, with video, and how do you discern if that information is accurate? And we do a number of things. I give weekly news quizzes where I'll purposely throw in a sort of false question to make sure that they're really paying attention, and I challenge my students. I'm constantly challenging them to read a variety of different sources. So even if it's one major event that's happened in the world, I ask them, pull information from CCTV, pull it from Al Jazeera, pull something from BBC and even the Washington Post, because I want them to have a well-rounded view of the news and the things that are happening in our world.
That is true also when you are consuming traditional media, right? You got different sources coming from different parts of the world, and it means now we have certainly making it more convenient for us to do so. But do you have problems dealing with the enormous amount of information that is coming your way all the time these days? What is the way, how can one be a smart consumer? It seems that we got the technologies already ready, but not yet the mind.
Well, that kind of an image of the smart consumer or the smart news reader could be a myth, because nobody can be that smart. And so in that sense, I'm not smart myself. And so what do I do? I go to CCTV, for example. I go to, for example, BBC and perhaps other news outlets, Sina, Sohu.com in this very country. And so I would compare. And so this readership habit changes because of the new media emergence. And that's something that I love it, because back in the past, we have only one source. And that one source...
come on, you also have several sources. You also could buy newspapers from all over the world if you really want to go out for several hours, going to the bookshops and
there could be one voice, but now we have multiple voices. And like what Professor Cheers said, we have citizen journalists out there waiting and reporting, and that's also empowerment to me.
That's right. But on the other hand, Professor Cheers, what is the definition now of journalism? As we know, when citizens, common citizens, quote unquote, become reporters, what is the definition of journalism these days? What kind of credibilities would one individual has to carry in order to be so-called a citizen journalist? But does that really matter to that individual who wants just to spread the information?
Sure. I think the biggest thing right now for individuals, because as you mentioned, anyone we know with a smartphone, which is most of us, we can go out and we can report a variety of different things. So I always tell my students, truthfulness, honesty, integrity, those are always going to be the things that are going to be held paramount. If anyone, if 5 people are standing around and they see a car accident, all 5 of those people are going to have different varying ideas of what actually happened, who was at fault, depending on the angle in which you were standing and when you were looking. So I constantly tell my students it comes to that. If you were out somewhere and you see something and you have your phone and you want to take a picture of that, make sure that you're accurate with that. Make sure that you try to get as much information as you can about whatever situation that you're reporting on.
But your students, I have to say, Professor Cheers, I have to say, students of yours are lucky ones, because they are joining one of those established universities and being tutored by a teacher like you. But when it comes to 6 billion people around the world who many have a smartphone, it is not important. It is not possible for them to get access to all of these instructing information. And therefore, the question is, when you have citizen journalism, will that be able to make it a more trait of integrity? or it's likely to make it a very mixed picture? As a result, will journalism be transformed? And will journalism still be respected at all, even when it comes to serious journalism, the real professional serious journalism?
Well, that's a really great question, and I think yes, I want to say I want to believe that as this world is constantly evolving and changing, and as more citizens are able to participate in the gathering of information and facts, that journalists are still going to be held credible. I think it comes with a matter of being, citizen journalists. I look at them sort of as our amateurs, and then of course I have our professional journalists who they make sure that they do their job. They're held to a higher standard, and they're supposed to be accurate. And even if you're gathering facts from citizens, I think we saw a great example of that internationally during the Arab Spring. And we also saw that even, domestically here in the United States with situations such as, police brutality in Ferguson, Missouri. You had people on the ground who were able to assist journalists in gathering that information. So as we're changing, I think that professional journalists have to just make sure that they are doing their due diligence to ensure that the information they're receiving from the public is credible and accurate, especially if they can't be there. But as citizen journalists, I always encourage them to, at the end of the day, if you're out there reporting on something and you see something, try to do it with the utmost integrity.
Right. Professor Tang, we all understand everybody wants to respect integrity, but under certain circumstances, people make compromises, even professional journalists. Many of the professional journalists have been leaving their traditional media organization to be individual journalists, to establish their own app and to write stories on their own. There is, of course, the operational cost they have to bear in mind. They have to make a living out of their trade. Earlier, they don't have to worry too much about the cost because they're with a huge organization, but now they're on their own. So will they still abide by the same level of integrity is a big question mark. And also, that leads us to the question of whether there will be more sensationalized stories because that attract eyeball, and we are in an eyeball economy. So all of these is not necessarily just about new or old, but rather a transformation of technology. And what would these technologies mean eventually for the content that we really care about? Professor Tang, I know it's a big question, but I think it's very important that I need to ask you here.
Well, indeed, and ideally, I hope that the professional journalism should go on and, in a sense, to continue in this world of explosion of information.
Well, should is not necessarily related to will be. So what do you make of this current reality, and what is likely to be the trend? How can we make sure it is going in what we still believe as the right direction, Professor?
Well, like I said, ideally, I still hold this professional journalism so very high and high up to this very standards, and both in terms of the community values and also journalistic values. And so in this sense, I think technology played a crucial role in helping professionalism to develop towards that very goal back in the past, that we need so many time, so many efforts in terms of verifying that very accuracy of the news. Now, I think with the technology, we have multiple sources. We have a professional journalism out there. We have also multiple others out there on the set, and so that they can send in and streaming in facts and also visual images. Look at the smartphone right now. We have this very smart feature.
It is very convenient. We all understand this. But Professor Cheers, what do you think? Will technology be able to bend our sense of integrity when that is becoming the mainstream, for example? What can we do? Sensationalized news certainly has already made its impact in Brexit, for example, or in the presidential campaign elections. So is it a real race, or there's some struggles we still need to have?
Yeah, I think it's a reality we need to embrace, and we need to then adjust to some of the struggles that it's going to bring about. So I'm going to go with it's a combination now. Where even in the United States, sensationalized journalism, which is a loose term for them, but, TMZ, which is more tabloid news, but they're looked at now as fairly credible, especially when it comes to reporting celebrity deaths, for example. They seem to be literally on the forefront, and people are taking them. Before they were just literally, paparazzi out there, snapping pictures of people. But now they're seen as something credible, and I think a lot of that came through a rise in social media and the way in which people are consuming news at an incredibly fast pace.
I see.
You get updates and push notifications. So I think it's coming. And I'm excited on where we're going to be 2, 3, 5 years from now.
Okay, finally, before we go, one sentence from both of you. What we are going to see, the so-called new media, the so-called old media, what is likely to be the prospect with the technology development in 1 or 2 years from now? Professor Cheers, briefly.
Briefly, yes. I think that we're going to see a continuing merge between traditional and new media. And I think that we're going to find out that traditional media companies are going to find ways in which the pay model hasn't picked up very well, but they're going to find ways in which to maintain and get their content to these younger viewers.
Professor Tang, one sentence.
Well, media convergence and do not sensationalize, sanitize news.
All right. Tang Jimeng, Imani Cheers. Thank you so much for being with us, both of you.
Thank you.
That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us. Or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.